Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his weathered hands with a rag that had seen better decades. Just like everything else on Kepler 438b, the mining colony's central power grid hummed with the irregular rhythm of a machine held together by spite. And electrical tape his specialty. At 52, Jake had spent more years coaxing life from dying equipment than most people spent breathing, and today felt like just another Tuesday of impossible repairs. The emergency klaxon shattered his routine. Through the reinforced windows of the maintenance bay, crimson ships descended like metallic locusts, their hulls gleaming with imperial sigils. The Terran Empire had finally noticed their little backwater world. Jake, Colony Administrator Chun, burst through the door, her usually pristine uniform disheveled. "They're demanding our surrender." 3 full battle groups enhanced soldiers, AI war machines, the works. "We've got mining equipment and prayer." Jake hefted his grandfather's adjustable wrench, its chrome surface worn smooth by 3 generations of Morrison hands. The old man had used it to fix steam engines. His father had maintained hovercars with it. Now it was Jake's turn to work a miracle. What's the Empire want with us anyway? Rare earth deposits beneath the southern plateau. Enough to power their war machine for decades. John's voice cracked. They're giving us 6 hours to evacuate before they claim the planet. Through the windows, drop pods began raining from the sky like burning tears. Each one contained enough firepower to level a city block, piloted by soldiers whose genetic modifications made them faster, stronger, and deadlier than baseline humans had any right to be. Jake tucked the wrench into his tool belt alongside wire strippers, a sonic screwdriver, and a roll of industrial-grade tape. His coveralls bore the stains of 1,000 repairs, each patch telling the story of another impossible fix. "Shine, remember when the atmospheric processors failed last winter? You jury-rigged a solution using coffee machine parts and Christmas lights. But Jake, this isn't a broken machine. Everything's a machine, Shun. Even empires." He grabbed his tool bag and headed for the door. "Empire's got all the fancy parts, but I bet they've never dealt with someone who knows how to make broken things work." The first Imperial shuttle touched down in the colony square, its landing thrusters scorching the synthetic grass they'd fought to grow in this alien soil. Armored figures emerged, their movements too fluid and precise to be entirely human anymore. Their weapons hummed with energy that could vaporize steel. Jake Morrison walked toward them, carrying nothing but tools, and the kind of quiet fury that came from watching powerful people underestimate honest work. The Empire had sent their elite to crush a rebellion. Humanity had sent an enraged mechanic with a wrench and the absolute refusal to let anyone take apart something he'd spent his life keeping together. Asterisk, the Imperial commander stepped from the shuttle with the fluid grace of enhanced genetics and military conditioning. His armor bore the golden threading that marked him as one of the Emperor's personal guard soldiers who had conquered 17 worlds without a single tactical failure. Behind him, a squad of Aegis-class battle androids unfolded from there. Transport pods, their chrome surfaces reflecting the alien sunset. "I am Commander Thane of the 47th Elite Division." His voice resonated through helmet speakers. "This world is hereby claimed for the Terran Empire. You have precisely 4 hours to—" "Yeah, about that." Jake stepped forward, his boots crunching on the scorched landing pad. "See, this place isn't exactly running like a luxury liner. Takes someone who knows the quirks to keep her breathing." Thane's helmet sensors focused on the approaching Figure 1 baseline human, aged 52, carrying primitive tools and wearing clothing that predated Imperial fashion by centuries. The threat assessment algorithm returned a value so low, it barely registered. "You appear to be maintenance personnel. Stand aside, citizen. This is a military operation." Jake stopped within arm's reach of the commander, close enough to smell the ozone from the enhanced soldier's powered armor. See, that's where you're wrong, son. This is a repair job. The wrench seemed to appear in his hand like magic, a practiced motion honed by decades of muscle memory. The first Aegis android moved to intercept, its combat protocols identifying Jake's sudden movement as potentially hostile. Titanium alloy fingers reached for the mechanic's throat at speeds that would blur human vision. Jake's response wasn't faster, was better. The wrench caught the android's wrist joint at precisely the angle where its articulation servos connected, applying leverage with the kind of precision that came from understanding how things broke. The android's hand sparked and went limp. Hydraulic fluid leak, Jake diagnosed, ducking under the machine's follow-up strike. Probably a blown seal in the primary actuator. Happens all the time with rushed manufacturing. Commander Thane raised his plasma rifle, but Jake was already moving, rolling beneath another android's swing while his sonic screwdriver found its way into his other hand. The tool's ultrasonic pulse, designed for loosening corroded bolts, played havoc with the android's gyroscopic stabilizers. Impossible, Thane breathed, watching his elite squad struggle against a maintenance worker who fought like he was repairing, rather than destroying. Aegis units are military grade. Military grade means built by the lowest bidder with the fanciest specs. Jake interrupted, now behind the third android. His electrical tape wrapped around its optical sensors, while the wrench found another joint. Colony grade means it's got to work when everything else is broken. The tape wasn't just obstruction, it was conductive, creating feedback loops in the android's targeting systems. Jake had learned that trick from a broken security camera that kept shorting out during sandstorms. As the last Aegis unit toppled, sparking and twitching, Jake straightened and faced Commander Thane. The enhanced soldier's augmented reflexes and tactical programming warred with the impossible reality before him. Your move, Commander. Commander Thane's enhanced neural processors ran combat algorithms at superhuman speed, analyzing threat patterns and calculating optimal responses. Every simulation ended the same way: total victory against a single unaugmented human, armed with primitive tools. Reality, however, seemed to have missed the briefing. Aegis squad down. Requesting immediate backup, Thane spoke into his comm unit while keeping his plasma rifle trained on Jake. Hostile exhibits unknown combat capabilities. Unknown? Jake chuckled, pulling a piece of wire from his pocket. Son, I've been fixing things since before you were grown in whatever tank they cooked you up in. Your fancy robots? They're just machines. And every machine has a breaking point. The response came swiftly, a second wave of Imperial forces. Hover tanks emerged from the larger transport ships, their anti-gravity generators humming with enough power to level mountains. Enhanced soldiers in full battle armor dropped from orbital platforms, their genetic modifications making them faster than cheetahs and stronger than industrial equipment. Jake studied the approaching force with the same methodical attention he gave to a malfunctioning fusion reactor. Hover tanks use magnetic field generators for lift, right? But they didn't shield them against electromagnetic pulse. From his tool bag, Jake produced what looked like a broken radio and a handful of capacitors salvaged from the coffee machine he'd mentioned to Chun. His fingers moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent 30 years making impossible repairs with whatever parts he could scrounge. What are you doing? Thane demanded, his weapons targeting system struggling to lock onto Jake's erratic movements, building a solution. Jake connected the capacitors in series using copper wire, stripped from an old data cable. Your empire's got impressive tech, but impressive don't mean practical. Bet none of your engineers ever had to fix a hyperdrive with kitchen utensils. The makeshift EMP device shouldn't have worked. It violated at least 12 principles of proper electronics and was assembled from components that had never been designed to work together. But Jake had learned long ago that the universe didn't care about proper design. It only cared about whether something worked. The pulse rippled outward as Jake triggered the device, invisible but devastating to unshielded. Electronics. The hover tanks dropped like stones, their pilots fighting to regain control as their navigation systems failed. Enhanced soldiers found their targeting computers dark, their communication networks silent. Impossible, Thane whispered, watching. His technologically superior force reduced to confusion and chaos. That's what they said about my perpetual motion coffee maker, Jake replied, already moving toward the fallen tanks. Course, it ain't really perpetual motion, just uses waste heat from the reactor coolant loop. But it makes great coffee, and the Empire don't need to know how it works. Thane raised his rifle, but Jake was already using the disabled tank as cover, his sonic screwdriver working on its access panels. Within seconds, the mechanic had found what he was looking for, the primary power coupling that fed the tank's weapon systems. The wrench came down with surgical precision, not to destroy, but to redirect. Jake cross-wired the power coupling to the tank's external communication array, turning a weapon into a broadcasting station that would scramble Imperial communications across the entire sector. Stop, Thane commanded, but Jake was already moving to the next tank, his movements economical and purposeful. Each disabled vehicle became another tool in his growing arsenal, their weapons repurposed, their systems jury-rigged into solutions the original designers had never imagined. Commander, Thane realized with growing horror that he wasn't fighting a soldier, he was fighting an engineer with a grudge and the kind of dangerous competence that came from making impossible things work every single day, the Imperial dreadnought inevitable. Victory hung in orbit like a steel cathedral, its weapons capable of glassing entire continents. Admiral Korath stood in the command center, watching his elite forces struggle against a single maintenance worker through orbital surveillance feeds. His enhanced cybernetic implants processed tactical data faster than biological minds could comprehend, but the results made no sense. Status report, he demanded, his artificial voice resonating through the bridge. Captain Vex, her skull gleaming with neural interface ports, consulted her tactical displays. Commander Thane's ground. Forces are ... neutralized, sir. The hostile has somehow converted our own equipment against us. 3 hover tanks repurposed as communication jammers. 2 squads of enhanced soldiers trapped in a feedback loop between their augmented reflexes and our own targeting systems. How is one unaugmented human defeating our most elite forces? Below, on the planet's surface, Jake Morrison was asking himself the same question as he worked beneath the hull of a crashed Imperial fighter. The pilot, a genetically perfected specimen with reflexes that could dodge laser fire, lay unconscious nearby, not from any weapon, but from carbon monoxide poisoning after Jake had fixed the aircraft's environmental system. The problem with fancy tech, Jake muttered, rerouting the ship's power through its communication array, is that it's designed by people who never had to make it work with what's actually available. His wrench found purchase on a critical junction, and suddenly the fighter's main cannon was pointing skyward instead of at the colony. Commander Thane approached cautiously, his plasma rifle useless after Jake had somehow convinced it that its own power cell was a hostile target. What are you? Jake looked up from his work, his face streaked with hydraulic fluid and determination. I'm a man who spent his life making things work when they shouldn't. Your empire builds complicated solutions to simple problems. Me? I build simple solutions to complicated problems. The repurposed fighter cannon, charged with a high-pitched whine, its barrel now aimed at the orbital dreadnought through a targeting system, jury-rigged from mining survey equipment and a broken telescope. Jake's modifications had turned the weapon from a precision instrument into something more like a cosmic shotgun, inaccurate, but devastating at the right range. You can't possibly hit a target in orbit with that, Thane said, though his enhanced tactical systems were calculating trajectory possibilities and finding them disturbingly plausible. Don't need to hit it, Jake replied, attaching the last of his electrical tape to a connection that would have made Imperial engineers weep. Just need to make the Admiral think I can. Above them, Admiral Korath watched his sensor arrays light up with warnings. The planet's surface was charging some kind of weapon crude, improvised, but with enough power to potentially damage his ship's hull. More concerning were the dozens of other energy signatures scattered across the colony. Every piece of Imperial equipment that had fallen into the maintenance workers' hands had been transformed into something unexpected. Sir, the hostile appears to have weaponized our own technology, Captain Vex reported. Communications jammers built from tank components, area denial systems constructed from disabled battle androids, and now what appears to be a makeshift orbital defense platform. From one man? From one very angry man with an extensive collection of improvised tools and what appears to be an intuitive understanding of our equipment's vulnerabilities. Jake activated his communicator, a device cobbled together from 3 different Imperial communication systems and a mining scanner. Admiral Korath, I'm guessing? This is Jake Morrison, head of maintenance for Kepler 438b colony. The Admiral's response crackled through speakers never designed for interplanetary communication. Surrender immediately, or I will reduce your world to ash. See, here's the thing about ash, Jake replied, his hand resting on the firing control. He'd fashioned from a broken coffee maker timer. It's real hard to mine rare earth elements from ash. But I got a different proposal for you. Admiral Korath stared at the tactical display showing his supposedly invincible fleet being systematically disabled by improvised weaponry that shouldn't exist. Jake Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades telling people exactly what was wrong with their expensive equipment. Here's the deal, Admiral. Your empire's got a problem-same problem every big organization has. You're spending a fortune on complicated solutions because the simple ones don't look impressive enough for the shareholders. Explain, Korath demanded, though his tactical processors were already analyzing the truth in that statement. The Imperial military budget had tripled in the past decade, while battlefield effectiveness had declined. Jake's makeshift cannon tracked across the sky, following the dreadnought's orbital path with targeting precision that defied its cobbled-together construction. Take your battle androids. Titanium alloy construction, quantum processors, enough firepower to level a city block. But they've got a fatal flaw their balance systems can't handle. Asymmetric stress, because the designers never expected someone to attack their joints with a wrench. On the surface, the colony's defenders watched in amazement as Jake connected cables between the disabled Imperial vehicles, creating a network that shouldn't have been possible. Mining equipment spoke to military computers, civilian power systems, fed energy to weapons that had never been designed to accept such crude input. Your enhanced soldiers are the same story, Jake continued, his hands working steadily as he spoke. All that genetic modification, all those tactical implants, but they're still using the same basic power distribution system as a hovercar. Cut the right wire, and all that enhancement becomes dead weight. Commander Thane, his augmented systems, still struggling to restart after Jake's electromagnetic pulse, found himself oddly fascinated by the mechanics analysis. You studied our technology? Didn't have to, Jake replied, now standing atop the repurposed fighter, his wrench catching the alien sunlight. Technology's technology. Doesn't matter if it's imperial or colonial, it all follows the same basic rules. The fancier it gets, the more ways it can break. Admiral Korath watched his fleet's status reports with growing unease. Every system that had encountered Jake Morrison's repairs was either offline or functioning in ways that violated fundamental engineering principles. The man had somehow convinced Imperial computers that they were colony mining equipment, turning weapons against their own ships and communication arrays into jamming devices. "What do you want?" the Admiral finally asked. Jake's response came through speakers that had been salvaged from a broken entertainment system and somehow integrated into the Imperial communication network. "I want you to leave. Pack up your fancy toys, file a report that says this planet's not worth the maintenance costs, and find someone else to bully." Impossible. The Emperor requires those rare Earth deposits. And here's option 2. Jake's hand moved to a control that looked suspiciously like it had been salvaged from a children's toy. "I've been linking all your disabled equipment into a feedback network. Right now, every Imperial system on this planet is connected to every other Imperial system. One button press, and they all start talking to each other at the same time." "Captain." Vex ran the calculations and went pale. "Sir, if he creates a cascade feedback loop between all our systems simultaneously, the energy discharge would be visible from the next star system," Korith finished. "It would also destroy every piece of Imperial technology within a 100-kilometer radius, including your ground forces," Jake added helpfully. "Course, it'd probably take out most of our infrastructure too, but that's the thing about being a maintenance worker. I'm real good at rebuilding from scrap." The silence stretched across space and planetary surface as the Admiral weighed his options. His enhanced tactical systems ran through scenarios, each one ending with either devastating losses or complete withdrawal. Finally, he spoke. "Commander, Thane, prepare for immediate evacuation. All forces, withdraw to minimum safe distance." Jake Morrison stood among the jury-rigged weapons and repurposed Imperial technology, his grandfather's wrench still in his hand, watching the most powerful fleet in human space retreat from a mining colony protected by nothing but spare parts and the absolute refusal to let anyone take apart something he'd spent his life keeping together. As the last Imperial shuttle lifted from the colony's surface, Administrator Chun approached Jake with something between awe and disbelief. "How did you know all that would work?" Jake wiped his hands on his coveralls and looked up at the departing ships. "Same way I know anything will work. Sometimes you just have to try it and see what breaks."